Welcome to The Best of Our Knowledge, a program focused on learning, education, and research. On today's show, we'll visit a mobile gallery that's bringing art to young students, and we'll speak with staff at Fort Ticonderoga about thousands of objects recently acquired by the historic site. It's all next on The Best of Our Knowledge. You're listening to The Best of Our Knowledge. I'm your host, Lucas Willard. Brainstormed during the pandemic, the FLOCKArt mobile gallery is involving students in bringing art to the upstate New York region. I visited the gallery in Rensselaer County in a school parking lot to speak with staff and students. Parked outside a Montessori school in upstate New York sits a multicolored shipping container. The large block letters perched on the container's roof spell out FLOCKArt, a project that intends to connect the public, and in this case, young students, to art in a new way. Tonight, on a chilly evening in late fall, the Woodland Hill Montessori School is celebrating its Sleepy Hollow Lantern Parade. Students in the school building are busy making their lanterns, while others perform fiddle music for the crowd of kids and adults. Outside, FLOCKArt is festooned with lights. The mobile gallery is having an opening tonight, but before I step inside, I meet Susan Thomas, the founder of FLOCKArt.
It kind of came to my mind during COVID, and I was like, how can I bring the community back together? Everything felt a little like wild when we were locked down, and so I started kind of thinking, how can I bring the community together? How do I contribute to society? And I'm an artist, and I'm like, this is how I feel we can bring people together who maybe normally wouldn't get together. So my idea for the gallery was bringing local artists to campus and have that relationship happen where the kids become immersed in whatever the artist is doing, and then the artist has a whole new community that they are, a part of. And the artist also is given a chance to have their first solo show, which is really important as you rise the ranks in the art world. And they're also given the opportunity to do, if you want to do some teaching, you have that opportunity. You can write your own curriculum, or we can help you come up with a parallel curriculum, which we've done for some of the artists. The kids have helped with the installation. They've studied installation work. They've studied organic art. And
here we are.
And here we are. And this is year 2.
So this is a shipping container?
Yeah.
And it's got a colorful mural on the side.
This was our first artist last year, Fernando Oriana. He did this. And so the whole lesson plan was about mural making, math. How do you make a small object large if you want to make a mural? We went downtown. We looked at all the contemporary kind of fresh art happening downtown.
Can we go inside?
Yes, sure.
Inside the shipping container gallery, there are works hung on the walls and sculpture work made of vines that twist along the floor and ceiling. The artist behind it is Blair Lambert.
My work is mostly based on just observing nature and just sitting quietly. There's a meditative aspect. And so I wanted to bring that inside.
And you have leaves
yeah,
on the floor.
And it smells great because everybody's decomposing.
And there's the vines are twisted up. They go across the ceiling. There's these globes. They almost remind me of birds' nests, or those the birds that build the nest in the reeds.
It should be natural, sort of organic forms. I have this we live on this lovely property next to the pine bush, and we have all these maples that are just overwhelmed by bittersweet vines, and the shape that they press the trees into is really interesting. So I was just kind of, trying to emulate that.
And you have pieces on the wall as well.
I do.
So it looks like these have a waxy texture to them.
They're made with wax.
So can you sort of explain the process a little bit?
Yeah, it's encaustic, and encaustic is painting with wax. It's hot, it's fun, it's steamy. You feel like a witch, which is lovely. You can either color the wax with pigment or use oil paint to color it, and that's what I do. It's several layers of paraffin wax, beeswax, depending on what kind of translucency I'd like, over layers of oil.
So tell me how you're involved here in the Montessori school.
Okay.
Maybe you can give me the history
So
of it.
in addition to getting to show my personal work, I took up writing a short curriculum of 2 lessons per class for the primary and lower elementary, and I think middle school I did a bit of. And it was based on my technique and my thought process of my art making, but not my art making. They didn't do encaustics because that would be a bit dangerous. So it's drawing by really paying attention to looking and detail and slow looking and taking your time. And the pieces look really nice.
What do you think the students get out of that?
A
Or what do you want to try and communicate to
a
them,
different
I
point
guess?
of view.
Yeah.
A less traditionally academic point of view. I think it's very helpful to have another teacher in the classroom to give their opinion, a professional artist and teacher to give their opinion. I thought they were asked to do things that they'd never been asked to do before. And some of them really liked it. And some of them hated it, which is fine, because nobody's going to love everything.
And then there's a door over here, and you have
Yeah.
some pieces on the wall, too.
Oh, goodness. So Susan was in my home, picking, we were looking at my work, and she saw that I did little drawings of silly little creatures. So here are my drawings of silly little creatures. But these are not related to what's in the show, other than the fact that I did them.
But there's a blue jay, and there's a mouse, and
Yeah,
is it more...
mice doing weird things. I don't know, it's kind of... Yeah, this is just my own pleasure, but they're available for sale.
Blair, last thing I wanted to ask is about you're working with a school and this being a very public outdoor space, and people can come in, and it's in a shipping container in a parking lot. It's very
Yes.
different from the usual setting. So what do you think about that and what it means for bringing people into art, interesting people in art, the nature of the gallery setting itself?
The nature is lovely because it's mobile, right? Potentially. And so we can bring anywhere that has, 40 by 100 feet or something. And that's fantastic. You can put it in a library parking lot. You can put it in the VA. You can bring it anywhere. And then it's a space that artists can show. And then people are welcomed in. They don't have to go and travel downtown to go to a fancy gallery. You can just put it in the parking lot. You can put it in the price chopper, for God's sake.
Joining us inside is Michelle Edwards, head of school here at Woodland Hill. Edwards explains to me that tonight's events and art opening fit into the school's mission of directly involving students with community.
Any event or special project that we take on here at Woodland Hill, it always involves a lot of direct interaction with the children. And that brings a wonderful, fresh perspective. And when we host an event like this tonight, it's not just adults putting together something to entertain the children. If you go through, you'll see throughout our facilities that the children have been deeply involved with creating the experiences that they're doing tonight. So they are here not just as participants, but they're hosts, and they have a lot of pride and ownership and feel a sense of agency in being involved with something like this. And partnering with an artist like Blair, who helped them to see the beauty of our natural surroundings and using the resources that we already have here on campus to create something magical and unexpected right in our midst was really a powerful experience for the children.
I think it looks great. And
It's amazing.
It's a super unique space too, especially to have something. I was just talking about the location and next to the school and how public it is. It's you don't have to go to a gallery, you don't have to pay money, you just show up.
Right. When we opened up FLOCKArt for the first opening in the fall of 2021, that was the first opportunity that we had here on campus after the darker days of the pandemic to be together in community. And FLOCKArt hosted the grand opening of this project, and so many people came to attend on campus, and that was the first time many of them were seeing each other in person since March of 2020. And since that time, it has continued to grow connections between families on campus. Even when we couldn't gather inside, we had this space that we could open the doors. We could be an indoor-outdoor experience. And Susan's vision and passion for the work has really brought this space to life with so many different artists and exposed our children and families to a lot of really great talent in the Capital District.
As I was viewing the encaustic paintings and organic sculpture, I chatted with a couple of 8th grade students, a part of the school's Curators Club, which worked to help ready tonight's opening at FLOCKArt. Delilah Massey and Eiley Volek are both 8th graders.
It looks like the Upside Down from Stranger Things.
It kind of does, but I like it. It's the first time it's actually been decorated like this. Most of the time, like what we did last year at one point was we had a bunch of the kids write sticky notes about things that inspire them, and we put it on a wall. So that wall right over there was just completely filled with pink, orange, purple, different color sticky notes. But it's the first time it actually has like elements from outside in it.
Though the pair will be leaving the Montessori school next year, they want to see FLOCKArt continue.
I love this program. I hope if it sticks around for I do hope that it sticks around for everyone who comes in, because overall it's been a great experience for me.
I will cry if it leaves. I will be very sad.
Delilah and Eiley's art teacher is Megan Stacy, who has been part of the effort to locate the mobile gallery to the school parking lot.
What I am hoping for is the students get to really relate to the artist as a person who works at what they do, get away from this idea of an artist just, is able to create a masterpiece in a second. They anything they touch turns to gold. When Fernando was here and did the mural on the outside, they saw him working every day for weeks and weeks, and they saw how the art piece comes together, which is actually pretty slow and pretty steady, and it's just important for me that they see that it's a job, that creating art is a job, and the artists get paid and have a work day just like everyone else.
FLOCKArt is now partnered with Collarworks, a nonprofit arts organization based in nearby Troy, New York. In addition to holding its own free gallery in the basement of an apartment building, FLOCKArt is another way Collarworks is helping to make art more accessible to the public and support up-and-coming artists. Elizabeth Dubbin is the organization's executive director.
We want to be a springboard for artists. We want them to be able to have opportunities that connect them to the community and support their practice, but also, fuel the conversation and the dialogue about really culturally relevant and important topics within contemporary art. So FLOCKArt, especially with the pandemic, you see just arts programming within schools and within communities really getting compromised. Opportunities for artists are difficult to come by. And so FLOCKArt was a way for us to kind of take what we do from an exhibition standpoint and a residency standpoint and combine it and take it on the road. And so for us, the idea is that it doesn't necessarily just have to be a school community that welcomes FLOCKArt in. It can be community organizations, libraries, very public-facing entities that want to engage the public, that want to work with the artists and residents, and just connect people around contemporary art. So we're really excited to see where the future of the program goes. Yeah.
You're listening to The Best of Our Knowledge. Historic Fort Ticonderoga in northern New York has acquired a private collection of more than 3,000 objects as the historic site prepares to commemorate the 250th anniversary of the American War for Independence. The Best of Our Knowledge's Jim Levulis spoke with Matthew Cagle, Fort Ticonderoga Museum curator, and Fort president and CEO Beth Hill about the significance of the acquisition. Cagle began by detailing some of the key items.
This collection, the Robert Notola collection, is perhaps the single largest, most important collection of material culture relating to the conflicts that shaped our nation, really, in the 18th century. Primarily the American Revolution, but the French and Indian War and other colonial conflicts as well. And so it contains objects from almost 2 centuries worth of time in the 16 and 1700s, including weaponry, muskets and swords and that kind of thing, all the way to soldiers' clothing, their personal equipment, their accoutrement, the tools that they used in the field, manuscripts, books that they used to learn the art of war. It really crosses almost every object type of the things that actually saw service during the military conflicts of the 18th century.
And I understand one of the key pieces of this collection is what's known as the Charles Reynolds musket. Can you detail what exactly that is?
Yeah, this is a particularly interesting musket in that it's one that is identified to a specific continental soldier during the Revolutionary War. And of course, collections like Fort Ticonderoga's have many firearms that date to this time period, but it's rare that we can actually pinpoint one to an individual. And this one has the distinct benefit of having its owner's name actually engraved on the stock. And what's more, beyond writing his name, Charles Reynolds, is the deeply branded initials U.S. on top of that indicates that this was property of, not even at the time the federal government, but of the Continental Congress, as they tried to get a hold of the military equipment that they had, that they were using quite literally to wage a war for independence, to create this nation that we now know as the United States of America. And Charles Reynolds is somebody that we've been able to learn more about. He was quite young. Most accounts indicate he was 15 years old when he made the decision to enlist in the Continental Army. And importantly, he didn't just sign up for a year. He actually signed up for a term of the duration of the war. So he enlisted, committing himself to being in the Continental Army for as long as that war would take. And in 1777, when he enlisted, no one knew how long that war would last. It had already gone on for 2 years, and he was making an unknown commitment, but he served out that commitment, and when the Revolutionary War did end in 1783, he was discharged with other Continental soldiers who had signed up for that term.
Was that unknown commitment, as you mentioned there, was that a rare thing to do, being that, as you detailed earlier, it wasn't a fully functioning government that was employing these soldiers, and we didn't know what the future would hold. To make that sort of unending, undated commitment, was that rare?
It was a unique concession that the Continental Congress made for the army that was fighting on its behalf. Because most of the armies of the time, the professional standing armies of Europe, like the British Army that the Americans were facing, or the French Army that we hoped to get on our side, soldiers would often there serve up for many, many years at a time. And what Americans found is that as the Revolutionary War began, Americans weren't willing to commit themselves to joining an organization like a standing army for long periods of time. And so the first 3 years of the Revolutionary War, we did what we did in previous conflicts, which was men signed up to serve maybe 8 months or a year, basically the confines of a single military campaign. And what they realized, what George Washington realized, among others, is that they were never going to maintain a war against the British this way, that you had to basically recreate an army every year. And when those men went home at the end of a campaign or the end of a year, they took with them their experience, they took with them the investment in weapons, in provisions, in uniforms, and equipment, and that if they were going to hold out against the British for a war that was looking like it was going to be long, they needed men to stay around. But they knew that they couldn't get men to enlist for the same duration that they would in a European army, under a king. And so they made a compromise. And Congress said you could enlist, you had two options. You could enlist for 3 years or the duration of the war, whichever comes first. And so men had a choice by 1777. If they were going to enlist in the Continental Army, they could choose one of these. If the war only lasts 2 more years, great, you're out early. If it lasts 3, you're in a little longer. But they didn't know how long it was going to last. And this was a unique concession to the character of Americans and their willingness to serve in the field, to get an army that Congress needed to maintain pressure against the British to win the independence that was, at that time, not even a year old.
Beth Hill is the president and CEO of Fort Ticonderoga. Beth, how did this acquisition come to be?
Our museum staff was familiar with the Robert Notolo collection, which, as Matthew has said, is considered to be the finest collection of 18th century militaria that exists in private hands. And it was really through a personal meeting with the owner of the collection, Robert Notolo. In fact, it was Matthew who initially met with Robert Notolo and engaged with him in the conversation about his collection. And we learned this really remarkable story, and one that is echoed through so many people who I talk with, whether it's scholars or teachers or educators, that Bob Notolo, as a young boy, came to Ticonderoga. He's in his early 80s now, but as a young man, he came here and he had what we call the Ticonderoga spark, in that he fell in love with the history and really the complexity of Ticonderoga's story, the French, the British, the American, the Native nations, and all of the other armies who are here. And our museum founders' collecting approach of the Atlantic world in the long 18th century was really what inspired Bob to spend his entire life going all over the world, collecting more than 3,000 objects to comprise his truly singular and remarkable collection. And so after a conversation with Matthew about his desire for his collection to come full circle and come in a way home to where, his passion began, we took this opportunity. I met with Bob and then, of course, introduced him to our board chairman. Fort Ticonderoga is a private nonprofit educational organization and museum and historic site, so certainly engaging our board in the conversation. We had already had long-term plans for capital growth, and this acquisition at that time, back in 2017, wasn't yet part of it, but it was one of those opportunities where we had to seize the day and pursue this acquisition. It could never be replicated again, and truly is transformative for our institution.
And you mentioned a bit of it. The fort plans to finalize this $12 million collection acquisition of more than 3,000 objects over the next few years. This is happening thanks in part to a $70 million capital campaign, which coincides with the 250th commemoration of the Revolutionary War. How overall is that campaign going, and what else is part of that campaign?
Our campaign, Shaping America Then and Now, has been years in the making. In fact, about a decade of planning and prioritization, and we have already completed our phase one of the plan, which is the restoration and adaptive reuse of a national historic landmark, the Pavilion, which was built in 1826 by the Pell family, who first preserved the Ticonderoga Peninsula and then founded our museum. With that project complete, the second phase of the campaign is the Notolo acquisition, and we've raised about $8 million to date in gifts and pledges of the $12 million total. We have acquired the firearms portion of the collection as of the end of last year, and so we're working hard to complete this acquisition. The third major piece of the capital campaign is the construction of a new major museum facility, which will really highlight the origin and evolution of our nation's military, and really, for the first time, be able to showcase in an extensive and incredible way our holdings and understanding of the period, really at once, taking a macro approach to the history and then micro approach to Ticonderoga's specific story. There will be other elements of the 250th initiative, such as the preservation and restoration of our historic structures, including the fort walls. Right now, we have a major project going on, funded in part by Save America's Treasures and an appropriation through Senator Schumer's office, and some additional restoration work done on the fort. And then programmatically across our site, we'll be implementing what we have trademarked Real-Time Revolution, which is a program which will follow the story arc really starting in 1774, 2024 through 1777 and even beyond, highlighting these anchor moments and signature stories of America's history, which took place right here at Fort Ticonderoga, as well as major exhibitions and other programs, whether it's teacher engagement or seminars or publications, as well as experiences on our Center for Digital History Learning platform. So we're just absolutely thrilled with the opportunity to take such monumental steps forward with this institution and at such an incredible moment in our nation's history as we reflect on the meaning of the War for Independence and its legacy today.
And when might visitors to Fort Ticonderoga first be able to see some of these, some items of this collection?
We do currently have a few pieces on display in the museum. So when we open for our campaign season, our daily visitation season at the beginning of May, there will be some of these pieces on display. But we're working right now, as Beth mentioned, on some major exhibition plans for the 250th anniversary, where we'll be mobilizing many, many more pieces from this collection to help contextualize that broad experience of the American Revolution as it occurred, both locally, nationally, and globally. So as early as 2024, you'll be seeing a lot more of this material available, but we're always also making this content as well as other pieces from our collection accessible to anyone through Ticonderoga's online museum database, which can be accessed from our website, wherever you are. I would just maybe also comment that, as I've said before, Beth, that this is perhaps the most significant acquisition to the museum, the most significant act the museum has undertaken almost since the restoration of Fort Ticonderoga in the early 20th century. So we're taking ourselves as an institution into another century of historic preservation and education in a different way, and connecting it with the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution is such a key way to gain traction and interest, I think, in this time period and these objects and what they represent for our nation and beyond.
Matthew Cagle is the Fort Ticonderoga Museum curator, and we also heard from Beth Hill, who is the president and CEO of Fort Ticonderoga. Thank you both for your time and your expertise.
Thank you for having us. We're delighted to share this information with you.
Certainly. Thank you.
That interview by the best of our knowledge is Jim Levulis. This has been The Best of Our Knowledge, episode 1680. The Best of Our Knowledge is a national production of WAMC Northeast Public Radio. Thanks to associate producer Jody Cowan. Our executive producer is Dr. Alan Shartok. To hear past episodes, visit our flagship station's website at WAMC.org. Until next time, I'm Lucas Willard.